Good morning, good morning, good morning, or good afternoon, good evening if you're watching this on the replay. Thanks for tuning in and being here to join me as I waffle on about another cognitive bias. The mind is just amazing, and I love how powerful it can be, but also that power often trips us up. And cognitive biases are just that. They're quick, shortcut ways of helping us to make fast, rapid decisions. The problem is that they're often irrational decisions and they don't necessarily help us and move us forward. So today I'm talking all about the peak end rule. So if this interests you and you want to know a bit more about it, I'll talk about the peak end rule, but it relates to a much wider understanding of how we use our mind and how memory really works. And there's so much information and detail I could give you on that. I definitely don't have time to go into it today. So what I would say is do check out my Moody Memories video. Just head to my YouTube channel, search for Mind Affinity on YouTube, and you'll be able to see that. And some of that really relates to what I'm saying today. So if there's anything from today that didn't quite make sense or didn't quite add up, go and check out the Moody Memory video, which will help make a bit more sense of it. So good morning. Say hi, those of you who are watching live. It'd be great to see who's there. Yes, Moody Memories, Sarah Higgs. If you watch the video, you'll understand why I called it that. It touches on a couple of different biases around memory, including how mood impacts how we remember things. And so, of course, as you've probably guessed, peak end rule is all about memory as well. When we look back on a situation, in fact, let's do it now. Those of you watching, think about the last time you went on holiday. Now, that may be a while ago for some people in the current climate, if you're watching this live. Think about the last time you went on holiday. What parts of that really stand out to you? What comes to mind right now? The chances are you're not remembering instantly the whole thing. There'll be specific moments throughout that you remember more. And those things will be the times when you had a peak experience. So it will be the things that stood out to you most because they elicited an exaggerated emotional state normally. Sarah Higgs remembers sunshine. That's nice. And laying still. I don't need to ask. So the chances are when you think back to a memory, you think about those peak moments and also the end moment, that last thing, how it ended. Those are the things that stand out most to us generally, without any other exceptions influencing upon it, when we look back over our memories. So what we tend to do is we summarize the entire experience based on how we felt in those peak moments. So that could be, if you think about if you've ever climbed a mountain, that's a great example. The peak moments of that would be if it all went smoothly and all went well and there was no real problems, it'll be reaching the summit and enjoying that amazing view. And then you probably also remember how tired you were when you finally got to the pub afterwards. If, however, you injured yourself, pulled a muscle, twisted your ankle on the way down, that is going to stand out in your mind and probably reaching the peak far more than any other parts of the journey. It's quite obvious, really, isn't it, that you remember the things that stand out most, and they stand out most because they have an emotional or notable impact upon you. What's interesting is that when we... Poor Dan. Sorry, Tilson. What's interesting is that it can really actually manipulate how we remember a situation. I mean, think about childbirth, for example. The end result is that relief when it's over and you've got a nice, healthy baby, if everything's gone smoothly. And so you remember that and you go, yeah, I'd love to do it again. You kind of forget how terrible some of it was. But you'll remember those peak parts of when it was really bad. Hormones play a big part in that and confuse the memory. So maybe that was a bad example to go into. And certainly not one I've experienced myself, of course. But yeah, we can look back and we can remember things in a really distorted way. Another example of this is if you've got a traumatic experience that you've been through, you'll remember the real peak moments and potentially the end, if you're remembering it at all. And so because those peak moments were so extreme, you could easily forget all the stuff in between, and so you imagine that the entire experience was that extreme, which makes it even harder for you to handle, deal with, and move on from. I can help you with that, by the way. Trauma is absolutely something that you can learn to really move on from. Anyway, so here's an example of where this bias can really kind of skew the choices and decisions that we make. Okay, so back in '93, a study was done with what was the name? Kahneman and Barbara. Or something. Anyway, a study was done where they took a load of candidates and they swapped around the starting order and alternated hands and things so that it was fair. But basically, what they did was there was 3 rounds. They got someone to put their hand in some really cold water for 60 seconds. Okay, so round 1, 60 seconds of having your hand in really cold water. Round 2, 60 seconds of having your hand in really cold water, followed by 30 seconds of having your hand in water that was just a little bit warmer than that, just 1 degree warmer. Then round 3, you have the option to repeat round 1 or repeat round 2. Which option would you go for? I'm sure if you've got any sense while you're thinking about this logically, you'd go for option 1, wouldn't you? 60 seconds of really cold water, as opposed to 60 seconds of really cold water and then more time with cold water that's not quite as cold but still uncomfortable. It's the logical answer. But actually, in the experiment, most people opted to repeat option 2 because they had that memory of it's really cold, but then, that feels warmer in comparison. At the end, I'd prefer that because it feels like it has a nicer ending. The peak moment of experience within that would have been getting to the end of the 60 seconds and it's really cold and really uncomfortable. And in option 1, then it stops. So you remember the really cold, really uncomfortable bit. Option 2, you get to that point of the really cold and really uncomfortable bit as a peak, but that's immediately followed by a sense of relief as you put your hand into something warmer. And then what you remember at the end is more comfortable than it was at the end of option 1. And so our bias kicks in and says we would prefer to repeat option 2 because it was a more pleasant experience for us in comparison to option 1, which is nuts if you think about it logically, because option 1 and option 2 are exactly the same for the first 60 seconds. And then in option 2, you've got to put up with cold water for longer. So how does understanding this bias help you? Well, as with all cognitive biases that I talk about, understanding it makes it easier for you to notice it and make more sensible decisions when you consider it and bring this into your decision making. But also from the perspective of, I know I've got a number of business owners that watch this channel, think about how this applies to your business, to the content that you put out, to the way that people navigate your website. It may not all be perfect, and that's okay. What you want to do is make sure that they've got a peak experience point that's positive and that it ends on a good note. So if you work with people one-to-one, make sure that you end with a follow-up that highlights the positives from that experience, for example. If you've run a big session for a group of people, do something to encourage them to remember those positive peaks that they've experienced and a positive spin to the end. So if you're running a workshop, make sure you end with something. Okay, so you've got an event and it's a whole day thing and you've got a whole group of people. You put your headliner on last, right? You put something engaging and entertaining so that people leave on a high, because they're more likely to remember that end point and that peak. And so they're going to assume that the rest of the day was just as awesome, which of course it would be. But sometimes there's elements of it that are going to be a bit more heavy going, where you're teaching and people are learning and it's all very factual and information based. You want to make that as enjoyable as you can, but there's some bits where it's just going to be fairly dry for brief moments. But if they've got the peaks that were engaging and fun and exciting, they'll remember those far more readily. And if you end on a high, that'll really secure that. So if you want to help people learn, you want to engage with people, you want to train staff, you want to run workshops, you want to anything like that, keep this in mind and make sure that there's peaks throughout and that you end on that high note to really help people reflect back and remember the positives of that situation so that they feel better about it and gain even more benefit from the whole experience. And you can kind of do the same for yourself as well. And this includes things like, I don't like doing the housework. Okay, well, what bits of it do you like the most? What could you do to encourage it to be a more positive thing? For me, that's putting on cheesy music and singing along at the top of my voice, annoying the neighbors. That's a great example that works for me. So throughout, if you've got X amount of time where you're doing X amount of housework, spread a couple of peak enjoyment points out, the things that you'll hate least or can enjoy most out of that, and really immerse yourself in them and end on something positive, which to me actually is it's finished and it's tidy and I sit down and I enjoy the nice, clear, clean space. Remembering to focus on those points during it will make it more enjoyable in the moment, but it'll also make you look back and have a more positive memory of that experience, which then makes it easier to get up and do the housework again next time. I hope that's been helpful. Thanks very much for tuning in. If you have any questions, do feel free to let me know. Even if you're watching this on the replay, whack them in the comments and I will get back to you or get in touch separately. And remember to check out the rest of my videos, including that Moody Memory video. They're all available either from mindaffinity.co.uk/lives or head directly to my YouTube channel and find them all there. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and I will see you all with a new cognitive bias exploration same time next week. Until then, have an awesome week. I hope it goes really well for you. Take care.